Hello and welcome to Law Unfiltered. I'm your host, Jonathan Mason, and we're here with our legal analyst, Sonya Madison. How are you, Sonya?
I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm doing great.
Good.
So, Sonya, we're in the midst of this presidential campaign, and one of the hot button issues has been immigration. And the Supreme Court recently shed some light on the immigration issue, and the case got a lot of attention, the Luna case, I believe. And I've got my understanding of what happened in the case a little bit, but we're going to lean on your expertise a little bit today on this case. And so, first of all, before we get into the case itself, some people might be wondering, why should I care about what the Supreme Court says about immigration? It's not going to affect me or my family. So why is this an important issue?
Well, like you said, we're in an election cycle year, and one of the things that's gotten Trump so much attention is the fact that he wants to build this wall, or have Mexico pay and fund this wall to keep immigrants out of the United States. And so with the fact that President Obama, during his final term, he had this executive order where he says we're not going to enforce a lot of deportations based on certain criteria, and some of those is like how long you've been here, are you actively pursuing education, and other factors, and Congress was in uproar about it because he did it despite the fact that they wouldn't come up with a resolution. I think it's good for voters and people in general to understand why this is so important. I mean, when you're talking about immigration, you're also talking about trade agreements that the United States will have with other countries. You're talking about foreign relations that a lot of presidents are going to have to deal with in their election cycle. And so when you are thinking about who you're voting for, you don't just want to think about what their stance is on immigration. You also want to think about their stance on foreign relations, because they really all connect in some shape.
Before we get to the Luna case, what's your view on the president's executive order? You think it was a good idea, or he went too far with it, or what do you think?
I do think that he went too far, but I also think that it was a necessary move. I don't think that he mandated or started any new law. I think he just said, I'm just going to make an executive order not to change the law, but just not to enforce it as heavily as he should have. And that's where I do think he went too far. I mean, he's responsible. His cabinet's responsible for enforcing the existing law. And so while he didn't make new law, I do think he overstepped it, but I also get why he did it. I mean, Congress is clearly not coming together to make any type of immigration plan, and there is a need to tackle immigration. We can't just wait around for years and years for Congress to come up with something. So I understand why he did it, even though I do think he overstepped his powers in doing it.
Okay. So let's talk about the Luna case a little bit. So my understanding is that Mr. Luna had been in this country for 30 plus years, quite a while. And at some point along the line, he committed a crime in New York. It was attempted arson, if I'm not mistaken.
Correct.
And so he received this punishment, which was not a severe punishment. And then he goes out of the country. He's from the Dominican Republic, goes to the Dominican, tries to get back into the United States. And what happened when he tries to get back in?
He essentially can. And it's important to know that he committed this crime and pled guilty to it 7 years before they actually catch him trying to come back into the United States. And so what the issue here is one of those, again, that I'm sure Obama's executive orders is probably one to tackle, is whether or not we should force him into deportation. And in this situation, what the administrative judge looked at is there is this law, the Immigration Nationalization Act, that says if you're here lawfully, and he was here lawfully for several years before he committed the crime, if you're here lawfully and you commit a crime, and it's a felony crime, it's an aggravated felony type of crime, then you're subject to deportation. So in this sense, they're arguing, and they're being the Supreme Court, arguing whether or not attempted arson reaches the level of an aggravated felony or some type of felony charge.
Is that a gray area, though? Isn't it a felony or not? Yeah, I mean.
Well, it depends on who you look at. Now, one side is saying, no, it's not gray. They completely said, here are the elements. The elements are not only the attempted arson or the attempt to damage the property, but also to get to the federal or to felony, aggravated felony status, you had to have crossed state lines, so it had to have been a federal offense. But what the other side is arguing is, well, that's just jurisdictional. I mean, the crossing state lines is minute or it's not relevant. They should just look at the act of the person. And so I tend to go on the side of, hey, the crime is the 5 elements, and that includes crossing state lines. But they're saying, well, no, because that's just the minute point. We're not going to enforce that. And a lot of people are upset because they're kind of thinking, well, one, he got convicted of a state crime. And if the state crime is not a felony, then we should stick to what he was convicted of. And they're also, of course, looking at the facts. Again, he was here lawfully for numerous amount of years. By the time this case came to the Supreme Court, or even came to the fact that he tried to get back in, he had a fiance, he was studying engineering. I mean, he was pretty much one of those ideal, he will be a productive member of the American society. But the other side is saying, we don't care about the facts. Forget that. The point is, he committed some type of an offense. We consider it an aggravated felony, even though it didn't meet all the elements, and therefore you can't come back in.
Wow, so you sort of answered one of the questions I had, which was, does the court or the immigration service not look into the other factors, like what's his personal life, does he have family, has he been a productive citizen, does he pay taxes and contribute to society? Are those not relevant factors?
Well, and I think it depends on what side you want to fall on the coin. Usually when you're the descent, you start bringing out the other external factors. And it was the descent here in this case that brought out the fact that he had a fiance, that he was studying engineering, that he had all these other factors that we should consider, whereas the majority did not really bring in any additional factors. But now if you look at other Supreme Court cases, for example, the Defense of Marriage Act, they rely heavily on external factors. I mean, they talked a lot about how this couple was together for a long time, how they shared a lot of community property together, how they had a lot of estate and other dealings together, and then the fact that one passed, the other person should be able to get entitlement to, whatever pension and all this other stuff that goes into play. And so in that case, yeah, they're going to look at the facts. But again, if you look at that assent opinion in that case, they don't care about the facts. In their mind, for the Defense of Marriage Act, they're just looking at what does the Constitution say. And in this instance, the Constitution does not give you a right to a license, which was what they were kind of arguing, whether you not have the right to a marriage license. And so they didn't really care about all these external factors. So it really just depends on where you want to fall. And that to me is somehow how the Supreme Court can get political. And it then also crosses that gray area of whether they're overstepping their bounds in terms of, the 3 branches.
Yeah, was there anything, from what you can tell, anything specific about Mr. Luna, why this might have turned into a political issue or some other social issue? Or because he seems like, just from my reading, understanding of the case and what you've described, he seemed like, a good person, I don't know if he's a citizen, but
right.
The term, he seemed like a productive member of society, so to speak.
Well,
so,
and those are usually the factors that make it political. Is because what a lot of people want to, and they usually when they try to bring their case to the Supreme Court, they're really trying to bring their best case. So had this been someone who maybe the same facts but wasn't going to study engineering, or wasn't somehow engaged, or was perhaps on welfare or something of that nature, I doubt the ACLU or other type of civil organizations that come and try to help people go to the Supreme Court would have put their hat behind this one. But because, like you said, this one had some of those extras, like you're studying, you're engaged, you've been here, you just had this one isolated incident, and now we're pretty much going to change your whole world based on it. That's why it gets to that point. And again, back to the executive orders that President Obama it put into place, he pretty much said in his executive orders, we're not going to deport people who similarly are here trying to get an education, who've been here for a long period of time, have parents that, have children who have been here lawfully. They're using those factors to determine whether or not we will separate people or we will deport people. So that's why it becomes a political thing, and I think that's why Congress has debated back and forth, Republicans and Democrats, on how they should handle immigration, but because they refuse to come together, it just remains one of those political ideals that we cannot get our hands wrapped around. Has
there been any backlash about this opinion, or most people seem to be in agreement with it? Or
not public backlash like some of the other opinions may have, like the Defense of Marriage Act still has some backlash going against it, and so not to that extent. But I don't doubt as we get more into the general election and we get past some of the primaries, that is one of the questions that's going to be asked of the candidates, how they will tackle immigration and perhaps their thoughts on Obama's executive orders and the Supreme Court decision.
Thank you, Sonya. Excellent information.
Oh, thank you. I hope it was informative as well as interesting to you.
Yeah, well, it was to me, and
Good.
hopefully it was to our audience. Well, thank you for watching another episode of Law Unfiltered, and we'll see you next time. Thanks again, Sonya.
Thank you.
All right.